When we think about lots of great people, particularly from the 20th century and onwards, when we add recording devices, oftentimes we see them as being incredibly articulate, particularly effective thinkers. A personal example would be, well, not personal. One example that I personally like to use would be Michael Zagru, a professor who is incredibly articulate. He knows philosophy to a degree that I doubt that many humans ever have or will have uh, quite the understanding of. He has this incredible capacity to turn the most complex uh, philosophies into less complex ones. And even people that are still alive today, rest in peace to my goat of philosophy. If we think of people that are alive today, like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson, who are certainly more controversial examples for their political views, but I think it's very hard to disagree with the idea that they are articulate and they are so popular, or they had gotten so popular in the 20s because in large part due to their incredible ability to articulate and to flesh out their thoughts. So in light of that, I saw a piece of advice online that said to ask ChatGPT 10 or 20 questions on if someone wanted to get to know you on a more personal human level, what would they ask? So I have the list right here, and I'll be reading them. Question number 1: how would you describe yourself? Describe yourself to someone that you are meeting for the first time. I am someone who likes to work hard. I am someone that enjoys challenges, and I think this is part of my, I suppose, addictive nature. I want those really extreme dopamine hits that you get when you run a marathon, an ultra marathon, or what you see in a lot of ultra marathon runners, or when you're doing some extreme sport. I suppose I have that nature. I'm very competitive. I'm a perfectionist, and more than everything, well, besides being a Catholic, more than anything besides that, I am someone that wants to improve. I want every day to become better than I was the day before. I strive to improve in every way that I can. Question number 2. What are some qualities that you are proud of? I suppose some of the qualities in me that I am proud of are what I just listed. I suppose I am proud of my love, my natural love for gaining knowledge, and my natural love for inquiry, and that in particular. What kind of person do you want to be in the future? I want to be someone who is effective, but more than anything, moral. Who is effectively moral, if you will. I want to be someone who people will go to for advice, who when the going gets tough, I'm the pillar that they turn to. That's what I want to be in the future. What motivates you when the going gets tough? When the going gets tough and the odds are ever stacked against your favor, I think what keeps me going is just my nature, really. When I was a young boy, I used to dream of, I suppose one could say, having a small farm with alfalfa and rabbits and being able to raise and grow those individually. But the the best laid plans of whoa, the best laid plans of mice and men should always come to an end, and I suppose that I could never follow that dream in earnestly while I know that I'm capable of doing so much more. So until I'd ever be, I suppose, ground down to my bones, then I could never truly follow that in all earnesty. I think that's what keeps me going. That desire to see where my limits truly stand. You know, there's this story with Alexander the Great. Aristotle's tutoring him, and Aristotle says that every person has their limits. So Alexander looks at this, thinks, goes on, right? He disagrees with his teacher, and eventually he spends his life, and towards the end of it, he says, I'll spend my limits finding where mine are. I'll do this. Actually, no, I completely misquoted the story. He answers Aristotle by saying that he'll spend his life finding where his limits lie. And then at the end, he says that there are no limits to him who will try, to him who is willing to follow his dreams. So I suppose that inspires me, and that's what keeps me going when the going gets tough. What's something that you have changed your mind about recently? I suppose just this last week, I've mentioned this in the last video, or probably the second video that I posted, that I've changed in my identity. As before, I had been someone who happened to be an individual and also a francophone, who just so happened to be one, not culturally or in any significant way other than being able to speak French. But now I consider myself as a francophone, as someone who enjoys the language. I enjoy the music, I enjoy the art, I enjoy the culture behind it, and the history that I carry today. What's number 7? What's a mistake you've learned a lot from? I suppose just general laziness. I spent too much time, I suppose, indulging in sloth, in procrastination, and not going for it. And I'm happy that I realize this now, instead of 10 or 20 years from now, that I want to work hard. I want to come home at the end of the day exhausted, because I find that's where I can find true fulfillment in my life. Yeah. Number 8. What's something that you've done that makes you feel proud of? Something that I've done that makes me feel proud of, I suppose, is taking my shot, even when the odds were against my favor, and most of the time it doesn't completely work out in my favor. I still take the shot. Like when I applied to UWC, even though I certainly didn't get in, and by all means I shouldn't have at that time, and perhaps even now, I suppose that that's not me to judge, you know. If you're a recruiter, and I've remembered to link my channel, you know, don't take my last sentence too seriously. Feel free to decide for yourself if I'm worthy of being in UWC. But I suppose that even though I was rejected, I still learned plenty from it. I still learned to actually attempt and go for my dreams. So even if I never end up getting into UWC, then I suppose I'm still grateful for the lessons I've derived from it. What topics or ideas do you enjoy learning about? Now, I suppose this is a philosophy channel. It's also what I'd like to turn into, a theological and a self-improvement channel. in all aspects. And those are by all means, the areas that have interested me most. I particularly like the older philosophies, the more classical philosophies that we see coming out of Socrates and Aristotle and whatnot. But recently, I've been indulging in more recent ones. I bought a copy of Zarathustra a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not very far in. I'm only 8 pages, but I think the ideas that I've seen so far are particularly interesting, even though, unsurprisingly, I have some amount of disagreement with Nietzsche, crazy idea, right? A Catholic disagreeing with what Nietzsche teaches, who'd guess? But again, that doesn't mean that I don't have things to derive from his teachings. I think that part of my own personal philosophy that I've sort of cultivated over these last few months is synthesizing contradictory belief systems that contradict with my own baseline ones, and I suppose making a bit of a chimera of philosophies, so I can really pick and choose what I think the best parts are in everyone's beliefs and add them into my own. Who or what inspires you the most? That's a good question. That is a very good question. I suppose the obvious answer would be Jesus Christ, God. That he is the ultimate inspiration. He's the ultimate virtuous man. Plato said, if there ever was a truly good and righteous and perfect man, after all kinds of humiliations, they would torture him and eventually crucify him. Now, of course, he was talking about Socrates in that quote, but I think it's particularly applies to Jesus, this incredible individual who was kind and to everyone, even to those that he knew would betray him, to such a point where Judas had to go and kiss him on the cheek because he treated no one differently. He wasn't above anyone, I suppose, in the way that he acted. Now, someone else from history, I enjoy deriving many examples from people like the saints who are very good examples, because I think that when you're looking at God, I think it's impossible to find a true relatability with him because he's so perfect and you are imperfect. Or at least in my case, I find it incredibly hard to relate. Now, of course, that's why Jesus came down in the first place, to be able to be relatable, to relate, I suppose, in part. At least that was the intention behind that. But I think that's also the power of the saints. These people who are imperfect like you, but who have followed virtue in many of the things they've done. I want to be a great thinker like Augustine or Thomas Aquinas, Saint Thomas Aquinas, Saint Augustine of Hippo. So I suppose those people inspire me, as well as Marcus Aurelius. I went on this tangent in the video that I made by the same name of Marcus Aurelius, but this incredibly virtuous man who's been presented with all the possible temptations in the world. He's the king of the world. He can do whatever he wants. And because of this, because if he gets sufficiently angry, he can lop off everyone's head. He never does. I suppose he inspires me. He's the closest person to a philosopher king that we've ever seen. And that's all the questions. Feel free to drop a comment. If you disagree with anything I said, feel free to let me know and we can have a discussion. As always, enjoy, like if you liked, subscribe if you want to see more of this content. Anyways, God bless.